Alright guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Welcome back. This is part 3 of a series that I'm doing on the connection between the Democrats and the Mexican drug cartels. I left off at part 2 talking about the Zapata family testifying against Guzman, who's just been convicted. And Zapata was saying how he and his family, or the cartel, would allocate money just to bribe Mexican officials. And so I'm starting off right there. And here's one of the people that he bribed. This is the president of Mexico. Get that out of the way. A witness says El Chapo Guzman paid off a Mexican president with a $100 million bribe. This is Nieto. He was the past president. The new president is Salvador. But the article goes on to say, a Colombian drug trafficker described as El Joaquin Guzman's right-hand man, who spent several years hiding in the northwest Mexico with him, said the accused Sinaloa cartel chief paid a Mexican president a $100 million bribe. Hildebrando Alexander Cifuentes Vila, known as Alex, said during the testimony on Tuesday, Guzman paid $100 million to President Nieto, who was in office from December 12th to December 2012 to December 2018. Okay, I don't want to go too far at the end of these articles because I have a lot to cover and I don't want to make these videos too long. So I'm going to move over and I want to show you how that corruption has crossed the border. Because when you're dealing with $64 billion a year, you can corrupt almost any country's officials, including the United States. And that has already happened. This article is dated 2011. It may seem old, but it's not, because the drug war has been going on for almost 30 years, or past, maybe even past 30 years by now. But this was recorded in 2011 by the El Paso Times. I used to live down in El Paso. I used to live on the border, and almost all the cities down there have already been corrupted by the cartels, because there's so much money and drugs passing through them, and they either get them with a bribe or they get them with a threat. But anyway, let me read this article for you. And it starts off by saying, two former law enforcement officers alleged that they cannot get anyone to investigate allegations that Mexican drug cartels have corrupted U.S. law officers and politicians in the El Paso border region. Remember, this is 2018. Let me see if I can get that down a little bit. Greg Gonzalez, a retired Doña Ana County Sheriff Deputy, and Wesley Dutton, a rancher and former New Mexico State livestock investigator, said that instead of arrests and prosecutions of the suspects, their whistleblowing activity has resulted in only threats and retaliation against them. I lost my job for a security company at the federal courthouse in Las Cruces because I would not keep my mouth shut, and someone threatened me by holding a knife to my throat, Gonzalez said. It's dangerous down there, people. It's dangerous. The border is the Wild Wild West. Okay, I'll move down a little bit. He said one of the street gangs that worked for Juarez cartel put a hit out on a special agent, Samantha McKeska. And I told the FBI as soon as I heard about it, Dutton said. We also had information on campaign fundraisers and parties in La Union that the cartel held for officials from New Mexico and El Paso. So they're already bribing their officials over here in 2011. A lot of important people at those parties, such as bankers, judges, and law enforcement officers. McKeska is a high-profile agent who investigations of the Barrio Azteca gang, it's an El Paso-based gang, El Paso Juarez-based gang, led to the prosecutions of the gang leaders. The gang, which has members in West Texas and New Mexico, is linked to the Carrello Fuentes drug cartel. Gonzalez said a U.S. law enforcement officer was suspected of selling to a street gang with Juarez drug cartel ties. A list of U.S. Marshals that included their phone numbers. With their numbers, the gang was able to clone the agent's cell phones and interrupt their calls, Gonzalez says. That way they would know when one of the agents was trying to serve an arrest warrant against one of their members. You believe that? Some of the stuff is just off the chain. I'm gonna leave a post to this article because I don't want to go through all of it. I just don't have the time. Let me go down to this one. Dutton said other informants told him that the Zetas drug cartel has a high-level member in the Las Cruces, whose wife holds a new non-law enforcement job in the DEA's office. The whistleblower also alleged that the corruption they've encountered includes a prominent doctor in El Paso who provides prescriptions for drugs to people who need to pass lie detector tests. The FBI was provided with all this information, and I guess that's why they're now saying that we're crazy. You got to read this. I'll put the link down. But I just want to show you how it is overlapped. How it is already overlapped. He said they also allege that the drug cartels have given big donations to politicians, which are unreported, to influence appointments of key law enforcement officers. Okay? Now I want to move over to this article really fast, and because this links you directly to the Democrats, and then I'll get into the heavier stuff. Former Democrat. The truth is, Democrats won't build a wall because they're under influence of Mexican mafia. So people are saying this. This is a different article. This is 2019. This is something else. A former Democrat and current Trump supporter unloaded on Democrats. Jeffrey Peterson says the reason the Democrats will never support the border wall, the reason is that they're being paid off by the Mexican cartels. And he goes on to describe who he is, his connections in Arizona, all his friends, some of them very high profile. You have to read the tweets. I'll leave the link to the article. I don't want to go all the way through this stuff. He talks about Kristen Sinema, the new Arizona, I think she's a senator. Just one. I think that was her, just one. And here's one of the tweets. He said, Democrats choose to take easy money that flows up to them from the south to the border because it's, number one, easy, and two, abundant. In return, they push Mexican PRI political objectives, and that is why you're seeing the Dems refuse to build the wall. Mexico survives off this cash, man. $64 billion is a lot of money. You put that wall up, a lot of people are going to be very mad. This is why they don't like Trump. Trump is getting ready to put a lot of these people out of business. Do your research, patriots. Want to understand why Mexico is able to keep Speaker Pelosi in a chokehold? Want to understand why some mysterious things that have been happening in D.C. for years that seem to be getting worse? Okay. This will be linked. Put a link in the subscription box. Now here's the one that ties it all together, and this is about a few months old. This was just put out by the Young Conservatives. This was dated February 13th. This week's conviction of Sinaloa cartel kingpin Joaquin L. Guzman heralds a major victory in raising awareness of the pure evil involved in Mexican drug smuggling through our porous borders. From sexually abusing 13-year-old girls as vitamins to boost his libido, to employing a hitman who used a tiled kill room made inside a house in border city Juarez. The trial demonstrated the obvious dangers of sharing an open border with a country burdened by near complete lawlessness. That's what Mexico is. In El Chapo trial, a witness alleged that the corruption of the Mexican government officials reached up to the president of Mexico at the time, Nieto, who allegedly received a $100 million bribe from the cartel. Left out of El Chapo's trial was the cartel's financial connections to key law enforcement players inside the Obama administration. In 2012, the Justice Department accused El Chapo-led Sinaloa cartel of moving over $7 billion through HSBC bank locations inside Mexico. $7 billion. This is just one bank, okay? So they've been doing this, probably multiple banks. The bank's Mexican locations allowed huge cash deposits, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in a single transaction, which were then accessible to the cartel at HSBC bank locations inside the United States. So they're laundering their money for them and then providing it for them back on the other side of the border so they can invest in other things. Legally here. And I'm gonna make a video on just them, how they're laundering the money, what they're doing with the money over here in the States, how they're buying the restaurants. You'll see the Mexican restaurants. Some of them are empty, sit there for years, and they got shopping centers, lots of things. The Mexican country has went from a poor country to a rich one in a very short period of time, and it's because of drugs. Despite playing a key role in establishing the cartels inside the U.S., the DOJ gave HSBC a slap on the wrist, a deferred prosecution, under which the bank would not be prosecuted for laundering billions of dollars in cash for the Sinaloa cartel, as long as the bank rehabilitated its practices and stayed out of trouble. You believe that? You know how much time these people should have got for this? Overruling career prosecutors who wanted to prosecute the bank, U.S. Attorney Loretta Lynch and Attorney General Eric Holder let the bank off the hook with a $1 billion fine, which made up a small fraction of 1 year's profit. They're pulling in $64 billion a year, and they fined them $1.9 billion. That's a great deal if you can get it. Holder's reasoning for letting the bank off the hook was, along with its employees and directors, what the bank was too big to fail. It is unknown whether the FBI Director Robert Mueller aggressively investigated executives and employees involved. Given the lack of convictions of his failure to speak out against the agreement, it is unlikely that Mueller engaged in any pre-dawn raids or SWAT-type style arrests. Ironically, Jerome Corsi, one of Mueller's current perjury trap targets, was one of the journalists who exposed the HSBC scandal. That's why he was targeted. A month after the deferred prosecution agreement was finalized, the future FBI Director James Comey took a 97% pay cut from his job as general counsel at the Bridgewater Associates hedge funds to join Britain-based HSBC as a director of the money laundering vulnerabilities sector. Do you believe that? The move reduced his jaw-dropping income from $6 million, over $6.5 million per year, to $200,000 a year. Now, why would he do that? Here he is joining the board. This is Comey, the same guy that's fighting Trump. The same guy. Calling Trump all these names. With former directly Attorney General at the helm of the troubled bank's money laundering compliance efforts, HSBC could assure its investors that the troubles over 2012 were over. Meaning they got covered now. They got Comey in there. However, Comey apparently missed the Russian money laundering that was taking place while he was overseeing the vulnerability sector. Less than 6 months after Comey took the HSBC job, President Obama nominated him to replace Robert Mueller as the FBI director. In 2014, Obama nominated Loretta Lynch to replace Eric Holder as Attorney General. HSBC clients donated $81 million to the Clinton Foundation. I hope this sheds a little light on what Trump is going through. You could see all these people fighting Trump. The same FBI, the CIA, all of them hate Trump. And this is the reason why. They're all dirty. Okay? Trump can put them all in jail. And that's what this whole thing is over. And here's a video. I'm gonna close this out with this video. And we're just going to close out and listen to Loretta Lynch. See what she says.
We are here today to announce the filing of criminal charges against HSBC Bank, both its U.S. entity, HSBC U.S., and the parent HSBC Group, for its sustained and systemic failure to guard against the corruption of our financial system by drug traffickers and other criminals, and for evading U.S. sanctions law. HSBC, as you know, is one of the largest financial institutions in the world, with affiliates and personnel spanning the globe. Yet during the relevant time periods, they failed to comply with the legal requirements incumbent on all U.S. financial institutions to have in place compliance mechanisms and safeguards to guard against being used for money laundering. Indeed, it was reported to one HSBC official that HSBC Mexico. Now, in the course of the investigation, these concerns were brought to the bank. And as part of its resolution of these charges, HSBC has agreed to forfeit $1.256 billion, the largest forfeiture amount ever by a financial institution for a compliance failure. They have also agreed to pay civil penalties of $665 million to resolve the parallel regulatory actions brought by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Federal Reserve Bank, for a total recovery of over $1.9 billion. Institution can use. They are then brought back into the U.S., literally trucked in, and sent to Federal Reserve.
Well, listen, but look, in Mexico, people, I think, have been arrested for the underlying crime. I don't think anyone is alleging this was the scheme. I don't think anyone is alleging that HSBC was the mastermind of this scheme. Rather, because of their incredibly lax and terrible policies, they permitted themselves to be an instrumental, essential element in it. And that's what we're holding them accountable for.
Send the cash to Mexico, funnel that cash back through the wire transfers